Hi everyone, welcome to the first episode of the Learn with Medical Library podcast. I'm Rebecca David, Senior Medical Librarian from the Chian School of Medicine. Today's podcast, we dive into the dynamic world of cultivating good reading habits amidst busy schedules in the medical life, as well as a practitioner's personal reflection on the human side of medicine and the intersection of arts and medicine. Joining me in this enlightening discussion is none other than our distinguished Dean, Professor Joseph Song from the Chian School of Medicine. Welcome, Professor Song.
Good morning, Rebecca.
Thank you, Prof. Song. Let's start off our conversation about cultivating good reading habits amidst busy schedules in the medical professional life. I think most of our students could also be facing this. What are some ways or strategies of how practitioners as well as students can fit reading and cultivate this as a good practice?
Let me start by telling you a story. When I was a young doctor, I finished my MBBS degree. I trained to be a gastroenterologist and went on to take a PhD course. During my PhD days, people like to come to the coffee room every day 2 or 3 times.
Right.
And they discuss everything. And I think, what does that to do with my work?
Yeah.
However, I gradually realized that this kind of conversation helps me to look at things from a different angle, including the experiment that I'm working on. And from there on, I start to watch Discovery Channel, I subscribe National Geographic, and I start to read books which are totally unrelated to medicine or to my daily practice. Because I think even as a medical doctor, you need to widen your scope. Because what we learn is really very focused, but also very narrow. And many a times you need to understand human being, especially facing life and death. You have to have those information, those backgrounds, so that when you talk to people, you are more human than just a doctor with medical books and so on in your brain.
Nice words, Professor Song. Thank you so much for sharing your insightful views on prioritizing reading in medicine. Certainly, reading is a very powerful tool to promote mental wellness as well. And as we read, we develop like a collection or a recommended list that is centered towards our interests, as well as also promotes professional development, which is key in medical profession as well. So, speaking of which, Prof. Song, are you a fan of libraries yourself?
Oh, definitely. I think we have a wonderful library. We are at the 20th floor and a panoramic view of Singapore. And this view really opened up our mind to the sky, to the waterfront and so on. After a day of heavy work, you can relax in the library, looking ahead of you and reading a book. It would actually help you to get back your peace in mind and also set your imagination much farther away from the clinics and the hospitals. I think it is a very relaxing and a very good thing for our mental wellness. So I love the library. It's so spacious, it is so calm and serene that we should all enjoy it.
Thank you for supporting our libraries, Professor Song. And a very big shout out to all our librarians in our beautiful libraries across the world. All of you are doing a great job. Speaking of which, Prof. Song, I'm sure our listeners will be very keen to know what are your personal favorite books or perhaps maybe your childhood cherished reads. Do share with us, please.
Yeah, unlike many other people, I'm not a great fan of novels. All right, I like to read 3 kinds of books. First is biography of famous people, successful people.
Right.
Because from their story, I can learn a lot of things about ups and downs in life, how their hard work and resilience finally achieve great success. And even from their speech can be so inspiring. JF Kennedy, Churchill, and so on. So recently I'm reading a book about Robert Koch, the founder of Shangri-La and many successful business. However, there are some dark side of his life, okay? And he has no shame to really share with us how he faced those difficult times and something which is even controversial and how he handles things like that. I learned a lot from biographies. The second type of book that I love to read is something that helped me to reflect upon life And there are many books like that, but the favorite book is called Tuesdays with Morrie. I think many people have read this book. It is about a professor in Boston University who is suffering from a disease called ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. It's a condition that from the toes up to the lower limb to the body, he's losing his function. So he becomes chair-bound. He starts to have difficulty feeding himself and dressing. He used to love dancing a lot, but now is totally immobilized.
Right.
But instead of feeling miserable and feeling sorry for himself, he keeps telling people how we should deal with losing our function and facing death. And his student, Mitchum Album, come to Boston to meet with him every Tuesday and talk to him. And through this weekly lesson, he learned a lot more about life and death, which I think it is so valuable. There are so many golden verses that I can talk to my who is suffering. And the final type of book that I like to read is something about the future, about future in medicine, for example. This is a series of books by Eric Topol, who is a cardiologist in San Diego. So in this book called Deep Medicine, he say, we are living in an era of 3Ds, that is digitization of our data, of our health data, democratization, that means patient's data is now open to everyone, particularly the patient themselves, and also deep learning, that is AI. How to translate these 3Ds into a better service to our patient, a better clinical outcome. So he has a lot of insight into how AI can help people and help doctors to make fast and accurate decisions, but not to ignore the human part of medicine. So I think this is a very good book. So these are the three kinds of books that I love to read. Yeah.
That's brilliant. I thought we were just expecting one recommended book, where we have three as a bonus. This is better than it gets. It's actually like a prescription from the mind, recommended by the dean himself from Lee Kong Chian School of Medicine. So, Prof. Song, in line with our conversation on connecting with our patients and understanding how we can actually practice close reading and journaling, which is something that practitioners can also adopt, and it becomes much more effective for their practice as well. Any heartwarming experiences that you want to share with us on how practitioners or even our medical students can find some inspiration to practice empathy and compassion towards our patients?
In my 40 years of practicing medicine, there are actually many stories with my patients. And these stories tell me that medicine is not just about prescribing drugs or doing a surgical operation. It's not just about science and technology. The human part is important. Yeah. So I remember many years ago, I looked after a young Irish boy who has Crohn's disease. I'm a gastroenterologist, so Crohn's disease is a very serious problem. And he suffers so much pain, diarrhea, and unable to eat and so on. He become a bag of bones, and a young teenage Caucasian boy cannot go out, go to school, cannot have his social life, so his life was miserable. Right. So I have the opportunity to take care of him year after year, and his condition stabilized, and every time he come to saw me in the clinic, he lift up his shirts, look at my six-pack. I feel very happy that he's growing and more happy. He can go out and socialize with his friends. And one day he brought me a small gift. It's a book lift, which says, to the world, you are just one person. To one person, you are the world. What kind of gift can be better than when your patient says something like this to you? That if you do your things right, if you care them properly, you mean the whole world to these people. Now he's a father of two. He's over 30 years old now, but we still have correspondence, and he lives in Vancouver. This keeps reminding me that medicine is not just science, but also an art of dealing with people with empathy and walk the journey of their illness with them. Sometimes you may not be able to cure a terminal cancer, But walking with patients in their last part of their journey and giving them care and dignity that they require will be something very meaningful and very important for them.
It's very heartwarming, Professor Song. And I think that it's the personal connections with patients that really makes medicine such a rewarding career. Let's now shift gears to talk more on the intersection of arts and medicine, which also bridges the realms of, I believe, creativity and the healing process as well. Prof. Song, what do you think about incorporating elements of art and literature and even perhaps creative expressions in the medical practice? How do you think this can actually help our practitioners to embrace this intersection of arts and medicine?
Yeah, I've never been an artist, all right? I don't even know how to appreciate paintings and so on. But 15 years ago, I started to learn calligraphy. It was actually quite an accident because I have to visit many universities, and particularly those in China, and they will give you a brush at the end of the visit to write something on the book.
Okay.
And I find it very challenging because the last time I picked up a brush must be 40 years ago.
Okay.
When I come back and I asked one of my patients who was a calligrapher master to write my name. He's a left-handed person. He picked up my right hand and then I start writing. So from there on, I have lots of calligraphies practice. And I find this is a really powerful way of helping myself to keep my sanity, because painting or calligraphy is a mindfulness training, I would say. Your breathing, your mind has to be really totally immersed into it, and you can put away all the troubles that you have in your mind, all the things that you've been puzzling with, and then give yourself some rest. And also, for example, writing a poem like this, you can have the opportunity to think about the meaning behind those words. And those are really wisdoms of many generations of people about life and death, aging, sickness, separations, and so on and so forth.
Yes.
And I really think that it helps me a lot, even in my own philosophy. And also when I talk to patients in particular, I would refer them to some of this poetry that I've been enjoying and hope that they will bring some hope to our patients.
Before we wrap up, Professor Song, thank you so much for sharing so many insightful views for us. Great takeaways for our listeners. So we spoke a lot about reading, and you've also shared your reflective practices when you were practicing medicine. You're truly an asset in medicine, and I think that a lot of our younger generation of doctors would certainly benefit from this podcast, hearing your insightful views as well. So on a last note, I'm curious, would you be writing any coffee books so that we can continue reading and feeling inspired from you?
I have written several books, both in Chinese and in English before.
Nice.
But right now, I'm actually working on the projects with our students.
Okay.
Because in the past 3 years, I have been invited to give named lectures and orations after very important characters in the medical history of Singapore. I have been inspired by some very important characters like Sir God and Chian. And those are very important people developing the history of medicine in Singapore. So I invited our students from year 1 to year 5 to interview a dozen of senior physicians and surgeons in the country and take oral history from them. So they went to interview them and record down what they knew about the history of medicine. I think through this exercise, our students will be able to be inspired by these giants, and they might see medicine in a very different light. So this will be printed out soon as a coffee book.
Lovely,
and
very
I
nice.
hope many people will benefit from it.
I'm sure our libraries will certainly park this under our SG Doctors collection. Prof. Song, any final words of wisdom for our listeners?
Many people will say, oh, I'm just too busy, I don't have time to read, okay? One very easy way of doing it is every time I go on a trip, at the airport, I will buy one book.
Right, okay.
And then I will try to read as much as possible during my holiday. If it is a long haul flight, 12 hours, 13 hours, I will probably finish the book instead of watching movies, which I will never forget the content. I can read some books. Yeah. And you never need to really finish the book from cover to cover. Just flip through some chapters and catch the main message or the words of wisdom from I encourage you to read one book per trip. But if you go on holiday 5 times a year, you read 5 books. And that will accumulate a lot of wisdoms for you.
Certainly. Thank you so much, Professor Song, for truly being a very inspiring icon in medicine, as well as sharing so many insightful views this morning. So before we leave, we shall thank Professor Song. Thank you so much for joining me today. Tune in next time for episode 2 of the Learn with Medical Library podcast. Until then, I'm Rebecca David signing off. Keep learning, keep exploring, and keep growing with the power of libraries.